And welcome back to CentralCoastRadio.com. Well, there's a very, very fascinating documentary called The Restless Hungarian, which is about to be released on streaming platforms, and we thought we actually want to get to know a little bit more about this amazing film, so we thought we would get the film's director on the phone today to chat a little bit about it. Welcome to the program, Tom.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Tom, tell us a little bit about The Restless Hungarian, because this is a film that is very, very close to your heart, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the journey that you went on with this film.
Well, making films all my life, but this is the most personal film that I've ever made, and it also is the most complex. It's a story about my family, principally my father, who was a Hungarian Jew who fled the Holocaust in 1939, came to the United States and became quite famous as a structural engineer and architect working on mid-century structures. But he hid his identity as a Jew in the United States, and I think that was something I discovered late in life, and was really the reason that I decided to undertake this journey of uncovering the story of my family that was not told to me.
What was that like for you in that moment when you found out that secret? Because it's something that has happened in our family as well. We've had something very, very similar happen, and it changed a lot of people in our family's lives forever once they found out. What was that moment like when you found out, and how did it change things for you at that time?
Well, the initial reaction was one of just being kind of stunned. I mean, I didn't hear it from my father. I heard it from a cousin that I met in Budapest. And at first, I didn't really believe him. And then he showed me. He pulled out an old shoebox with documents of my father's birth certificate and marriage. The entire family was Jewish, and and then I thought about it, and I thought, well, it kind of makes sense because it sort of explains a lot of gaps in my father's narrative of himself. He was a great raconteur, told these great stories, but there was always like some missing pieces, and somehow this made sense. And then many months later, I decided to confront him and say, "Hey, Dad, why didn't you tell me we were Jewish?" And I was actually had become quite angry at him by that time.
Yep.
But he was an old man. It was, I think like his 80th birthday or something, and he looked frail. And when I finally saw him. And so I kind of went at it very gently, and I said, "Gee, I heard this strange story in Hungary that we might be Jewish." And he froze. His entire demeanor changed, and I saw on his face this expression of something I'd never seen before. And he was a person who was always very self-assured, who was quite famous in the world, and I saw a man who was deeply afraid.
Yeah.
And it only lasted for a few seconds. No, we're descended from Seventh-day Adventists who immigrated to Budapest from Transylvania in the 18th century, which I knew was a complete fabrication. And but I could see how scared he'd been, and so I never said anything more to him about it.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
But then the whole process of making the film was sort of like filling in the blanks. Going back to Hungary, visiting family members, talking to business associates. It was typically I'd work in a documentary for a year and a half, this took 8 years, and it was both a film and a book. The book was published before the film in 2019.
Was it a difficult decision to go ahead with the book and the film, or did you find it quite an easy decision to make?
I was completely drawn into it. I felt it was on my path, and I decided when I embarked on this that I would make this film because I wanted to make it. I wouldn't ask anybody else for money to make the film. I wouldn't worry about the marketplace, as I had been doing my entire career. So it was a very personal undertaking, and one that I really embraced. It wasn't always easy, and I think that where it became difficult was when I started to become a character in the story. When I was, had to write about the places where I was growing up as a boy, and trained as a journalist, you're trained to treat one's subject with a certain objectivity and humility, but suddenly I was part of the story, and that became very difficult. It was very difficult to write myself into the story, and I had a wonderful board of advisors who looked at rough cuts of the film and said, "You need to be in this story," and I listened to them.
You kind of touched on my next question there. Of course, we always put our heart and soul into the films that we're making, but how did that change for you with such a personal story? Because I know from myself, I've tried to write a film about a moment that happened in my life, and every time I sit down to write the script, there's something there that blocks me from doing it. How did you overcome that difficulty and actually get through that and put yourself into this as a character?
Well, I think I had to get to a certain age. I mean, I started working on this project when I was 60 years old. I had inherited a box of documents from his life, including journals that he kept as a young man, and it was, papers and photographs and visas and stuff in 5 different languages, only 2 of which I speak. But early on, after he died, I would open that box of documents, and I would try and go through the stuff that I could read in French and English, and I would become incredibly sleepy. Yeah. And I did not want to go forward. So it was really, it wasn't until 13 years after I got this sort of box full of hidden secrets that I decided to get into it. And the way into it was that my father was a architect and engineer, had built a summer home on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and it was influenced by the mid-century modernists. I mean, he had studied with Le Corbusier and Weidlinger, but to me it was just a house. But it had sort of fallen, it had become a derelict building on national land, and a nonprofit group decided to restore it as a model of mid-20th century modernism. And we're looking for volunteers. And I volunteered to be on the work crew restoring this house that I spent summers in as a child. And suddenly I became curious to know, who was this guy who built this house? Because there was all kinds of stuff I didn't know about him. So that was the kind of beginning, with the physically reconnecting with that house, and ripping off rotten siding and pounding nails. And it's kind of what got me into it.
Definitely. And Tom, what kind of emotions were you going through as you worked on the film and kind of uncovered more secrets or uncovered more pieces to the jigsaw puzzle? What kind of emotions did you find yourself going through at that time?
Well, there's two answers to that. One is it happens in the first 5 minutes of the film, so I mean, this isn't really a spoiler.
Yep.
But at the point when I was writing the book, where I started to write about myself and my mother, who was a schizophrenic, and my sister, who had a very troubled life, I became extremely depressed and suicidal. And I didn't understand why, what was going on. And I think it was because in order to write about these members of my family, I had to, in essence, time travel back to the past, to being a young person, when I was traumatized by living with a schizophrenic parent, and really get close to these people in order to understand them and write about them. And that was the most difficult thing. I will say that over the years, I have come to know my father, the people who are my parents, outside of them as parents, as people who were in the world independent of me, and whose lives were affected by the currents of 20th century events and politics in profound ways. I mean, Holocaust, the Cold War, modernism, just to name a few. And I really will say that I came to love my father more after his death as a result of this project than I did growing up. Because growing up, I really didn't like him very much.
Yeah. Well, that is absolutely amazing, Tom. And the result of your hard work on this film is an absolutely amazing documentary. So I guess to finish off the interview, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to sit down and watch this amazing film?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a cliche in a way that we kind of carry with us our ancestors. And this film was kind of a deep dive into not only my own parents, but, my grandparents' generation, and to really make real these people in the world that they lived in. And I think that there was something tremendously healing about that. The film is about a lot of things. It's about the Jewish diaspora. It's about the Holocaust. It's about the Cold War. It's about immigration. But I think on its deepest level, it's about intergenerational trauma and the healing of that trauma, and making the film, and I hope also viewing the film for people that also suffer from intergenerational trauma will be a useful experience.